Hello and welcome. I'm Jarvis. I am a cross gamer with about 12 years of Belgreth experience and about 3 years of Amtgard, who plays in the Iron Mountains primarily. And this is a small unit tactics class. Let's see. Why tactics? Well, in Amtgard, one versus one fighting culture is inculcated to a certain extent. The sword path is dictated largely by tournament performance and the warrior ladder, and there isn't, as of yet anyway, though that may change soon, a path for battle games where tactics are more emphasized. As such, fighting as a team can fall by the wayside or perhaps be of secondary consideration in such an environment. And speaking from my own experiences, and I haven't traveled like far and wide for Amtgard per se, but I've noticed a tendency for ditch fields to split up into multiple duels, almost to a comical degree. Maybe some of you have noticed this at your parks or certain events as well. And this is, it's not necessarily a bad thing or anything like that. It seems natural. There are things that Amtgard focuses on more than Belagarth and vice versa. In Belagarth, there is more of an emphasis on militia-style fighting and big line engagements. So team tactics are emphasized to a greater degree just as a matter of course. My hope is to bring some of those tactical considerations from a Belagarth perspective to kind of an Amtgard crowd. My focus will be mostly on like ditch battles, smaller engagements, and militia games. That said, though, some of the concepts I cover here can easily apply to battle games as they rely on purely, conventional physical approaches. Magic and battle game abilities won't be the focus. These are things that anyone can do, regardless of what class they're playing. The overall goal here is to give players attending kind of some things to think about for the next time they attend their park in person, now that those parks have begun to open again. This is an online course, so it might be a little scuffed. It might be a little trickier than it would be if this were conducted in person with drills and such. The visuals are going to be a little bit different, but I'll do my best, and I'll be opening the floor for questions at various intervals. So here's kind of the overview. I'm going to kind of start by talking about tactical approaches to various combat scenarios with, I'm going to be using a board game as a visual aid for that. But we're going to be kind of thinking about smaller scale engagements like 2 versus 2s, like smaller ditch lines, maybe 7 versus 7s, 5v5s, and so on. There's going to be a bit of a chat about battlefield awareness, what that means, what that looks like, effective communication on the field, and what that looks like as well. Leadership to some extent. I'll be talking about leadership from your perspective as a player looking to do some of it, as well as if you were on the line fighting with someone who is naturally inclined to take a leadership role. And then lastly, I'll be kind of talking about ways to practice and drill some of these concepts. So, what are tactics? What do I mean when I say that? Basically, tactics are leveraging of your strengths and mitigating your weaknesses while doing the opposite to your opponent in order to gain an advantage. Large-scale battles can often be thought of as many small unit battles happening simultaneously. Tactics tend to apply to the small unit group or the quote-unquote micro scale. Strategy, by contrast, is the kind of the bigger picture, the long-term goal. These terms are often used interchangeably, but I'm going to be more focusing on the former rather than the latter. First off, I want to talk a little bit about the kind of the evolution of battle, windows of opportunity, just kind of conceptually before I get into these specific examples. As a fight progresses, particularly ones that begin kind of as a line fight group engagements, opportunities will begin to open up just incidentally, naturally, For example, when lines become staggered, like many of you have done many ditch battles, I'm sure, and you've noticed that oftentimes there's not just one big homogeneous line that is perfectly, level, right? Oftentimes there will be, one kind of central line, maybe with like 3 or 4 or 5 or so people engaging each other, and then maybe you've got a couple of edges, you've got a couple like miniature lines kind of on the left and right of you. One group might push over there more than the other group, and this will cause like a stagger in the line. And from those staggers are created these opportunities in which you can flank and you can backstab, and backstabbing is OP, it's overpowered. If speaking kind of earlier, I don't know if I mentioned it too much, kind of how like the fantasy hero vibe that Amtgard tries to instill in its players, which is all cool and good. Backstabbing is one of those ways to fulfill that fantasy. I mean, if you get behind the line, you stab a bunch of people in the back, you kill like 3 or 4 people for free. I mean, that feels great, right? I'm sure many of you have done this yourselves. There's also the hammer and anvil. This happens a lot naturally as well. What'll happen is you got kind of your main central line that engages, and one side will push more than the other, perhaps against you. Let's say on your right side and their left side, they manage to push hard enough to kind of become a sort of a hammer, and which they then will smash your line against the opposing line, which has become the anvil, right? That's just hammer and anvil. Most of many of you probably know what this is. Just for any who don't, that's what I mean when I say that. Additionally, these opportunities, these windows, they could be created deliberately. Moving offline or on the fringes to force opponents to break away from the central line to engage you is one such way to create the opportunity if done correctly. Baiting opponents into moving with you. If they're aggressive, you can kind of get them to take the bait to move with you. If they're more passive, you can perhaps force them to move back to get yourself into a more advantageous position to then maneuver for a flank or a backstab. You can also even play a more passive approach. If you're more of a patient type, you can delay your approach to the line and you can look for gaps to open up. Sometimes those will happen. I guess this is less in the category of like creating deliberately, but it is something you can do deliberately, right? You can be more patient. You can be, you don't have to be the first one on the line, right? You can wait, kind of delay your approach, see what happens. If perhaps you have teammates who are inclined to fight on the fringes and look for flanks, that will stretch their line out more, which could create a gap that you could rush through. I'll be using that in one of the examples with the board game. You'll be able to see visually what I mean. That's kind of it for this part. I'm going to be getting into some examples here shortly. Before I get into these examples, I want to impress one very important thing, and that is don't judge the tactical soundness of your actions based purely on the outcome. And are there any D&D players in here? Sometimes, in spite of your best efforts, your opponents will roll 17s and 18s, you'll be rolling 2s and 3s. That's not to suggest that, like, combat is random or anything. I'm just saying, like, even if you make the correct decision, sometimes the outcome will not be in your favor. But that doesn't mean you didn't do the right thing, right? So keep that in mind. The initial examples I'll be using here will operate under the assumption that everyone on the battlefield is of roughly equal experience and skill. We'll talk about skill differentials and what you can do about that as well. I'll say it specifically, like this is what you do when someone outskills you in this particular category or whatever. Here's something you could do to kind of bridge that gap. I'm going to now switch over to this game. I'm going to share screen with that instead. While I'm setting that up, does anyone have any questions? Just one moment while I get that going.
No questions from me. I'm just really appreciating the class.
Okay. Here we go. Fingers crossed for this working well. Yeah, all right. Okay. So I'm going to start with I'm going to start really simple and just kind of like extrapolate from there.
No, in fact,
right?
It seems we were never hired.
One moment, please. Okay. Oh, and by the way, real quick, so this game here was created by a Belligrim that goes by the name of Rift, and he fights on the West Coast. He kind of just made this, I just wanted to mention he's created this game, and I'm using it as a visual aid for this class. He thought it was cool I'd do this, so I wanted to mention his name. So I'm going to start with just kind of a really basic kind of like 2v2 engagement here, right? Let's say I'm going to be using this marker, this purple marker, as like this is an example of like what you might do in a situation. So we're going to kind of be approaching all these from the perspective of like you are the red team, right? You're always going to be like the red team. I can't do like third colors. I can't make like a purple team or a green team or whatever. It's just red and blue. So let's talk about, and then also these represent sword and board. So these are sword and boarders. These are Florentiners. These are polearms, right? I'll be talking about that as well. But let's start with just like a basic 2-on-2 sword and board engagement, right? In you're fighting a 2v2, most of the time, you'll saunter up, you'll stand and deliver, and you'll exchange blows with the opponents. Maybe this is you right here, right? You'll look for ways to kind of snipe at an arm. Oops. You'll look for ways to kind of like take advantage of someone being slightly out of position, and you'll just kind of fight it straight sometimes, just kind of head on, right? One thing you can do in these situations is try to convince the person that you're lined up against that you want to make it a 1v1. And this could be easier to do if you're fighting Amtgarders. Maybe they're more inclined to take you up on a 1v1. But your goal here is maybe to turn this into 2 very quick 2 versus 1 fights. And the way you can achieve this is if you think they're more aggressive, you can kind of step over, get them to engage you, get them to come for you, right? Maybe you step away a little bit. Maybe maybe you step away over here briefly. See if they'll follow you. See if they take the bait. Maybe they're like, yeah, let's fight. It's like, cool. I love that, So you're kind of walking around them, maybe you're kind of sidestepping. You're still exchanging blows, fighting more defensively. And then suddenly you throw an inside leg and you just step over here real quick, make this a 2v1 with your teammate. Come over here, make this a 2v1, right? That's one thing you can do that's very simple. You also probably want to communicate a little bit. When you throw a leg over here, let's say, you're like strafing kind of the outside, throw a leg, and you say now, or something like that to your teammate. And quickly, you make this a 2v1, make this a 2v1. You do want to be careful in these situations. If you step to the side, and let's say they don't take the bait, and they're like, okay, if you're going to just leave me, I'm going to just, double up on your teammate. Obviously, you don't want to let them do that. So don't like overcommit to it. You want to be very reactive. If you know them well enough to know that they're going to take advantage of this in that way, maybe you can do some other kind of baiting in that regard. Maybe you could punish them for turning their back on you. But generally speaking, you kind of want to play it by ear. The other thing is if your teammate is legged, you don't want to leave them behind. So if in the course of this exchange, your teammate is legged, let's say this is your teammate here, this is you, right, still? And they're legged, you generally, as a rule of thumb, I think you want to fight on their non-sword side. You want to stay near them. And so the best way to do that, and it's kind of hard to represent on this map because I can only really put pieces completely in one square. But the idea is that you kind of want to stand just a little bit behind their shield side and pivot off of them. You don't want to overextend. So if these two are trying to approach you, what they might try to do when your teammate is legged is they might try to get you to step out of the comfort zone a little bit, They might try to get you to come at them, You don't want to let them do that. You want to stay here. You want your numbers to count for as much as it can. And by the way, this doesn't just apply to a 2v2 engagement. This applies to a 3v2, a 4v2, any situation in which you are, or most situations, I should say, not literally every situation, but most situations where someone would draw you or attempt to draw you away from a numbers advantage is one you want to resist. It is extremely important also not to, I think, underestimate your opponent, right? If you think you're a hot shot and you can take someone in a 1v1, that might be the case. Maybe you can, blow them out or whatever, but you don't necessarily know that. They might get you unexpectedly. It's generally safer and smarter to do this. It might be kind of boring, but you want them to come to you in that situation. Your teammate is immobilized for the most part. Obviously, they could probably crawl, but you don't want to assume that they can move. They're not going to be able to move nearly as fast as you are. So you want to hang around them. The other thing this does, by the way, is it allows, let's say that they're right-handed. This allows them to strike on their right side clearly while you protect their shield side so they don't get flanked or wrapped. That's the other important part. Your opponents might try to kind of work an edge like this, and your job is to protect their back, and their job is to protect your back. The other thing to consider is that your teammate, because of the fact that they have a shield, and shields are unbreakable in Amtgard, that can make them very difficult to kill, right? In Belagarth, and I'll mention this later, it will become relevant. In Belagarth, polearms can destroy shields. In Amtgard, that's not the case. You also can't body check people or do anything like that. So this is a very, very defensible position to be in. So just take advantage of it. That's the idea, right? Anyway, the other part I want to talk about briefly is considering experience levels in a 2v2 engagement. Let's say
you there would be dinner.
Let's say you and a teammate are moderately experienced fighters, and maybe you're facing off against one very experienced fighter, right? The solo in this case is probably going to try to separate the two of you. Maybe they'll try to do the leg and leave thing. Maybe they'll try to get someone to be legged. Obviously, I just kind of talked about sticking with them. The other part you want to think about is you want to be engaging them shoulder to shoulder as much as you can. You don't want to be in a situation where you step off. You know, maybe try to keep pace with them. If you're a little bit faster than your teammate and they're trying to get you to walk around to engage them, you know, don't be too eager. You know, don't try to play the hero too much. Try to make sure you're moving with them, right? You want to join your forces together as much as possible. You know, you want to be there in case if your teammate suddenly makes a move and they're like, aha, I'm going to try to, you know, aggress on them. You want to take advantage of that. Maybe you can set up a flank with them. You know, the more experienced fighter is probably pretty skilled at multi-opponent combat, and they're going to use that to their advantage. If you're, you know, again, if your partner's like, stay around them. Don't fight alone. Conversely, let's say you are the more experienced fighter and you're against people who are lesser experience, right? You want to be careful choosing your targets. It's not necessarily going to be advantageous for you to take a leg in this situation. You might want to fight upper quadrant. You might want to take an arm. No matter what fighting style your opponent's using, whether it's Florentine, even a polearm. I guess that gets kind of weird if using polearm. I can talk about that more later. No matter what their fighting style is, if you take an arm, it's going to be easier to kill them. If they're fighting with a shield and you take their leg, they're now an unbreakable shield. Maybe they're a very good ground fighter, and that makes it harder to finish the job, you know? Now you have to focus kind of on this person fighting with them, and if they're doing the same thing I was just talking about, where they're kind of pivoting off of their leg teammate, it might make it harder for you to, you know, fulfill your goal of killing these two, right? So keep that in mind as well. I'm going to kind of talk more now about larger scale battles. Were there anything question-wise before I go on to that? Okay. All right. So, oh no, my stuff disappeared. Hold on. Oh, there they are. Okay, thank goodness. All right, we're going to move these out here, and then I'm going to enlarge the map. You go away. All right. All right, we're going to make this a little larger. Okay, so here's kind of the visual representation of what I was talking about before with staying mobile. This is kind of, this section here is going to be staying mobile and setting up and looking for flanking opportunities. So we're going to kind of start off with a 7 versus 7 ditch line, right? This will kind of put like a Florentine over here, maybe a shield over here or something. Here's kind of what I mean by lines naturally staggering. So let's say you are. Actually, I'll decide who you are in this scenario here in a moment. But so the idea is that you know, Leon's called, and everyone starts moving up, and you know, pretty soon you got a line that maybe looks, you know, maybe something like this. Maybe you've got 2 people out here, you got 2 people out here. You know, people are spreading out. We got a 3-on-3 line here. It looks like this. And then let's say these 2 out here, you know, maybe they move a little faster. You know, maybe they run up or something. And you end up with a line that looks maybe something like this. And maybe this group, maybe they move a little bit harder. Maybe you got something like this, right?
Go ahead.
So this is kind of what I was talking about before with natural staggering. If your side is extended past the main line, let's say you're one of these 2 fighters over here. Maybe you're a Florentine, maybe you're a shield. Look for ways to disengage and start hitting backs. Let's see. You know, there are a few ways to do this. One, you could again, kind of using the example before, if these 2 fighters are kind of more on the passive side, maybe you aggress on them more, maybe they back up, you know, they retreat and they keep fighting defensively. This works better if you're the shield and you're here. If you know, you can maybe feint that you are engaging them a little bit, and then boom, you peel off and go right here, right? Now, they might call out and say, look out, you know, and even if that happens, if this sword border has to like move to address you or turn, that's a huge advantage. Obviously, you just turn this into a 4v3, right? And not only that, they're paying attention to two fronts simultaneously. That's really bad for a polearm. A polearm's main weakness is being forced into a close quarters fight. So if you can get them to even turn and look away from you, like even if you like, let's say you're not quite there fast enough and you just peel away. Maybe you kill this sword and border and you're just like, all right, I'm going to come over here and menace. You take care of this person over here. Even if this polearm turns and acknowledges your presence, and for the purposes of this, I'm going to treat this as though a polearm can strike one square away, and then if you're a sword and board, you can only strike one square away, you know? Or sorry, so polearm can strike two away, like this square or this square. Or these ones over here. Even if you're kind of keeping your distance and menacing them, you know, just your mere presence can be enough to turn the tide of the fight. If you're feeling comfortable, I do advocate for you rushing them down, because if one of these people don't react to you, I mean, if you rush in there and you kill this polearm and you die doing it, that's a job well done, especially if you already took someone out in this line, right? I'm going to be speaking generally about this too. This isn't always true. Obviously, it depends on who you are and who you're fighting. Generally speaking, a polearm is more valuable than a single sword and board, and the reason for that is that when you're on a line fight, a polearm is often able to threaten more range. You're swiping legs, you're going over shields and hitting backs, and you're doing it with a lot of reach, right? You don't have to move close to do it. They threaten a large area even when they're stationary on the line, right? So if you force them into a close quarters fight like that, you know, rush them down. That's often very advantageous. Even if you don't do that, maybe, you know, maybe the line looks more like this. You peel away, you can take a couple backs, take a back step here, take a back step here. Oh, maybe the polearm reacts to you. That's fine. You've just taken out two people for free. That's excellent. You've done a great job. Let's see. If the other thing you can do besides just like faking an engagement and then peeling off is if you think you're faster than your opponent. Let's say the line maybe looks more like this, you know, and you're just on the edge and you push back and you're kind of fighting sword and board. You're in a great position already. If you push them past this point, you can throw an inside leg really quick, nice safe shot, you know, immobilize your opponent, and then peel off, right? Otherwise, they'll chase you. Because if you don't take a leg and you move and you try to take it back, you know, you might be able to get a couple backs, you might be able to get people to turn, but you're going to have to keep moving because you're going to get chased, right? They're not just going to sit there. Yeah, exactly. So leg and leave is very, and I'm going to be saying that a lot. I hope it doesn't become like a huge meme, but it's tried and true for a reason. It's because it's extremely effective in group engagements. Leg and leave, run through, take it back. Again, even if you just get their attention, that's great. If the shield moves over to engage you, that's wonderful. That's so good. Now this forward team can move in here and start eating their faces. You know, it's great. It's a good time. Let's see. Another thing you can do is you can be more patient and kind of wait for a gap to naturally open up for you to seize opportunity in. Let's say you're over here, right? You're just kind of waiting, or let's say actually a better way to illustrate this is if everyone lines up, everyone's kind of grouped up together, and then people start to move to the fringes. You know, here's a line. Not much of a gap here necessarily, you know, unless you start to move yourself. But let's say you want to be more of the patient observer. You want to wait for an opportunity. Maybe you're not feeling as quick on your feet. Maybe you want to play it that way. You don't have to be the first in the line. This actually has a couple of advantages in that, one, you can observe the tendencies of the people around you. You know, you can see who's more aggressive, who's more passive. You know, if anyone's like kind of the leaders, you know, if anyone falls into a leadership role, you can kind of observe who that is on your team as well as their team and take note of it. But more importantly, in the context of looking for flanking opportunities, if someone splits off over here, maybe on your team, maybe you have someone over here who likes to dance around and get other people's attention. That's great. Maybe these two are like, all right, this person's a problem. They're fast. We want to make sure they don't get a flank. So these start engaging them over here. And well, I don't know. There's a chance you can just sprint right through. Maybe you can just kind of walk up like you're going to engage the line. Then, look at that. I'm just going to sprint right through the line. That's gap. Now I'm doing the same thing again, flanking. Right. That's another thing, another way to approach it and create an opportunity for a flank or a backstep. if there are no such opportunities to respond to that, maybe this person responds like, nope, I'm not going to let you through. I'm going to deny that closure, or I'm going to, force a closure. Then you can just reinforce your line and still fight normally. But you want to just keep yourself appraised of the situation at all times if you can. I'm going to be using a bit of a meme phrase. Check your mini map. Look around. Battlefield awareness is extremely important. I'll cover that more later. But just get into the habit of looking around you and appraising the battlefield. Another situation. You're on a ditch field and your team's doing extremely well. Let's say it started as a 5 versus 5 and your team has just been winning so hard that now it's a 3-on-7. Now there's 3 of you here. Maybe you're all shields, let's say. We'll just pretend these aren't here. Chill. All right. And they have 7. You have 3, right? You want to look for opportunities. Well, first of all, you want to stay mobile. If you group up as a 3 and you try to stand and deliver, that's generally not going to go well for you. It could go well. It just depends. But generally speaking, it's not necessarily a sound approach, right? If these 7, if you walk up and you've got a pole arm on you, you've got like 2 to every 1 fighter here, just on the front line alone. This is kind of an intractable situation. You don't necessarily want to do that. If you are, on the other hand, able to stay mobile and stop them from surrounding you, which I highly advocate for, you can open up opportunities just by kind of playing the attrition game, maybe looking for limbs, looking for ways to draw out the fights. Let's say one of your teammates spreads out over here, another one goes over here, and maybe they're like, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to send 2 after this person here. We're going to put 3 in the front and center here to engage you. Let's say, you're this one right here. This is you. And then 2 come over here and engage your other teammate. Maybe they're over here and something's happening. You're kind of more focused on the people in front of you. You kind of need to be in this situation. Look for ways to kind of separate them. You know what? I'm just going to remember this is you. Okay. So maybe they start to engage you as a group. You got a Florentine protecting the polearm shield, and then they're just going to advance on you. They're going to try to poke you to death. So you start backing up, and you're like, okay, maybe one of them gets just close enough to engage you, and maybe you could take a leg really quickly and just back up and see how these 2 react, right? See if they keep following you, or see if they fall back into formation and expect you to come to them. If they follow you, if they're like, okay, well, it's still 2-on-1, we can take you. Maybe you take another leg. Maybe you try to snipe an arm. Maybe you try to snipe limbs. But either way, you just don't want to be pinned down in one location. You don't want to be intransigent, right? You want to keep moving. If they don't react to you trying to draw them out and bait them into multiple one-on-one fights or little one-on-2 fights or whatever, and they're like, okay, nope, we're going to make you come to us. You come and get us. We're just going to fight you as 3 or nothing else. It's like, okay, well, at that point, you might want to look around the battlefield a little bit. Maybe your teammate here has been really squirrely and has dodged around, and maybe they've drawn these 2 out to engage them in this direction. Well, look at that. Boom. I can cut over here. I can cause an advantage over here. Now, granted, if you do this, you might want to be careful because whoever you didn't leg is probably going to be on you real quick, especially if they're quick to react. You probably want to keep moving. Maybe you just speed on through, you take it back, and you keep moving because these 2 are going to be chasing you down, right? But the idea is you don't want to be in one place. You don't want to fully commit to any engagement necessarily, because at least until you have a numbers advantage or you're equal up, because they generally will outnumber you and they'll be able to pressure you much better than you can pressure them. So you're looking for ways to snipe limbs and fight a long battle of attrition, right? You're looking to take it back, keep moving. Maybe you and your teammate, maybe you can get them to move with you and away from this person. Maybe you leg them. Maybe your teammate dies. Maybe they sacrifice, and then you've got these 2 chasing you. Either way, the point is you're looking for more ways to just move around the field, take very small windows of opportunity advantage, and then you just keep moving. That's if you can, if you can keep up. I know this kind of gets, especially with the weather we've been having now, running around might be a little bit of a tall order, but if you can do it, it's great. Let's see. Another thing. This is just kind of a general, very simple thing you can do, and that is protecting your polearms. Step with them. The goal of a polearm is to deal as much damage and destruction as possible And one of the best ways to facilitate that is to protect them. Make it your mission. Just when the line engages, walk with them and make it your mission to keep them alive and striking with impunity, because that's the best place for them to be, right? Their weakness is also, as I mentioned before, getting drawn into a close quarters fight. You don't want any of them to close distance. You want to protect them and keep them swinging. Encourage them, step with them. You can step just a little bit ahead of them, kind of put your shield out in front of them, and say go, strike, Make sure to keep them active. If it's like a newer fighter and they're just picking up a polearm for the first time, or maybe not the first time literally, but like they're fairly new to it, encouraging them can go a long way toward them becoming and developing that instinct of being like a very field effective polearm fighter. You want to encourage that in them. So just try protecting them. See if it, try it on, see how it feels. Step in front of them. If an opponent tries to aggress on them and tries to like rush them down, interpose yourself. Even if it means that you take a death for it and you die just protecting them, do it anyway. Not all heroes wear capes. Sometimes they die so that others can have a higher KDA. That's good stuff to do. Conversely, if you have a polearm on your team that's pretty self-sufficient, maybe they're more experienced, or they're able to get themselves out of tight situations, maybe you should look to rush down their polearm. If you can rush them down, maybe there's like a slight gap. Maybe the polearm gets a kill here. Oh, look at that. Rush in, kill them. Maybe someone looks away, distracted momentarily. You can just notice. You can rush in and kill them. If you can rush down a polearm, kill them, and live, you've done your job amazingly. If you rush in and kill them and you die, that's okay. You've just eliminated the polearm while your polearm still lives. And hopefully the rest of your team can work well with them and continue to allow this polearm to lay waste. That's good stuff too. One moment, please. There's another thing I want to talk about, and this applies mostly to militia games, and that is the presence of missile weapons, right? This also applies to Belagorth, but this is also important. Let's say the opposing team has an archer, right? They're walking around, they're looking for shots. A lot of times, an archer's looking to shoot a polearm. That's one of the polearm's biggest weaknesses. I mean, they're also probably looking to shoot a Florentine or two, but more importantly, they're going to probably be trying to shoot a polearm, right? The polearms are very destructive support weapons. It is in an archer's best interest to neutralize them. So one thing you can do is be aware of when an archer is knocking an arrow and when that arrow is active. Say, arrow up. Just call it out. This alerts your team to the fact that there is an active arrow and they need to be ready to block. Look for opportunities to block arrows for your polearm, And if maybe you have a Florentiner next to you, you can block for them too. You don't have to like super overextend yourself. Obviously, your archer might try to feint a shot or something. The point is you want to be ready to block an arrow if it's coming, especially toward your polearm that you're trying to protect. If an archer shoots over here, obviously you're not going to have go gadget arms. You're not just going to block them with a shield, so don't worry about that so much. Kind of focus on your immediate vicinity. And hopefully by virtue of the fact that you called out arrow up, being the astute observer that you are, the other people on your team will also be able to defend against it. And hopefully that just goes better for everyone else. And if you start calling arrow up, maybe other people will take that, kind of example and start doing it themselves. If they weren't already, of course. So yeah, this applies to like battle games, militia, not ditch line. Obviously you don't have missiles there, but all the same, this is an important habit to get into. I highly recommend you do it if you haven't already been doing so. The last thing I'll kind of talk about using this kind of like diagram, or I guess like this board game, is the concept of the rock paper scissors. I'll start with the Belagorth rock paper scissors. Some of you might already be familiar with this, but if you're not, it goes like this. Here, I'll use the same colors here. So we're going to be doing clockwise. So the rock paper scissors of Belagorth, generally speaking, goes like this. Archer kills polearm. Polearm kills shield. And shield kills archer. The reason for this being, as I mentioned before, archer, will strike down a polearm. Polearms don't tend to have as much protection in the way of shields. They might have like an arm buckler or something if you're playing Bell, or if you're in like a militia game, I suppose. I guess that would be possible. But generally speaking, they just don't have as much passive protection because they have a two-handed weapon, right? So they are, and this kind of applies also to Florentine. It's just that generally you'll find that polearms are higher priority targets. So we can kind of put them in the same category, I suppose. You might even make that argument. But this is kind of what the triangle looks like. Polearms tend to fare very well against shields, especially in Bell, because they can break shields. It's less the case in ditch battles, or in Amtgard in general, I suppose, because they don't have the advantage of being able to break a shield. They can just kind of like poke exposed limbs and stuff, right? And then a shield generally fares very well against an archer. Should be obvious. It's because they can block arrows and run them down, right? In a ditch scenario, the triangle's a little bit different, because instead of having an archer, you just got these three main fighting styles. So the counter kind of more looks like this, I would say. Polearm tends to fare very well against Florentine because they don't have as much passive defense. Obviously, a Florentiner can like block the polearm with one sword and close him with the other one. That's kind of their win condition. I'm just kind of speaking in generalities here. Generally, I would say, and again, this isn't necessarily so clear cut, but this is about the closest approximation to an RPS I can come up with for ditch, is that Florentine tends to have a little bit of an advantage on shield, and that's just because you got the two swords on the one, and then unlike the last example, shields actually have a pretty good advantage against polearms, because not only do they have an unbreakable shield, but they have more passive defense that allows them to close distance and force that polearm into the weakest position they can be in, which is that of a close quarters fight, just rushing them down, kind of like with the archer, in a way, I suppose you could say that the polearm replaces the archer in terms of long range engagement considerations, right? All right. I'm kind of done doing the board game part of the presentation. So before I move on to the other slides, were there any questions regarding any of these scenarios or anything like that? Okay. Cool. All right. I'm going to close up the game. All right. Excellent. And then we're going to go back to the slides here. All right. Thank you for your patience in dealing with the constant switching here. This is what happens when, you have two different sources of visual aids here. So anyway. All right. Kind of picking up where we left off. I mentioned something in the middle of those demonstrations, and that was check your minimap. This is kind of more a consideration of battlefield awareness. Every so often, glance around the field situation and be aware of impending flanks or one of your sides getting collapsed by the enemy team. Battlefield awareness is a skill that can take some time to develop, but the most important first step is to get used to peeking at your minimap, video game terms, all that stuff, nerd, hello, and developing it as a habit. From there, you can kind of get better ideas of how to react to different situations. So as kind of mentioned before, gaps in the line can be capitalized on if you're aware of them, and the first step toward that is being aware of their existence in the first place. Take note of opposing fighters who are also looking to flank or seize an opening. Be aware of gaps in your line. Fill those gaps if you can. You want to deny flanks if you can, if you're not actively flanking yourself. This is an especially useful habit to get into if you're fighting statically on a line. Naturally, if you're someone who's kind of looking to flank and run edges, you're going to generally have more battlefield awareness, because let's say you're someone who likes to hug the right side and fight on the fringes. You're going to see everyone to the left of you, but whereas if you're kind of centered in the middle and maybe you have to kind of be regarding those in front of you, you're not necessarily going to always be aware of what's happening on the sides, but getting the habit of at least glancing around is just very beneficial. I highly recommend it if you can. Other thing is, and this is going to get into another slide I talk about later, is communicate what you see. That kind of works in conjunction with this improved battlefield awareness, Using someone's name and telling them to look in a direction is a very, very useful habit to get into. If you see someone coming from the right, you can tell them to look right, The There's also responding to an impending hammer and anvil. You can issue a command for people to kind of rally or move. I'm going to be talking about that also in another slide. Anyway, yeah, it's just a good thing to practice. It's a good thing to, it's a good habit to foster. Communication. Want to talk about this as well. If you're feeling up to it, you can try communicating a few basic things. Saying slide left or slide right in response to an impending hammer and anvil, depending on the direction, can be very, very useful. And you'll be surprised at how often people will fall in line with you. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be like domineering or commanding. I mean, just saying it and, kind of like, hey, everybody, we're in trouble. We need to move, kind of having that emphasis and that urgency behind what you say can be very, very useful. It requires being proactive as well, because if you wait too long for a hammer and anvil, I could have actually demonstrated it earlier, but oh well. If you wait too long, the hammer might already be there, and you won't be able to avoid that space in enough time to avoid suffering significant casualties. So you want to be proactive as possible. If you see it starting to happen, say, all right, we got right side, look right. You could say slide left to move away from them, and reposition. It'll be much easier you'll have much better odds of victory if you can get your team out of that situation. And it starts with communication, right? It may require some repetition. Don't just say it once. Maybe say it a few times. Say like slide left, or if they're coming from left, say slide right, slide right. The point really overall is to help your team move to a less compromising position overall. The other thing is, and this seems like so rudimentary, but like it's something I neglect to do sometimes, so I have to remind myself to do it, and that is learn the names of your teammates. And this allows you to communicate with them. If you know the name of someone who looks like there's someone coming to flank them, saying their name, look direction, hey, you look right, so-and-so look right, so-and-so look left, look behind. You can say turn. As long as you say their name and a direction, hopefully they respond just quick enough and just minimally enough to react to it and avoid a bad outcome. Short names are faster to say. Bonus points if there's a long name you can abbreviate. If you've heard someone use a nickname for someone, that can be helpful. Obviously, the faster you can communicate, the better you can impact a battlefield with that communication. This can, and it will, save lives. So, try it out if you don't already do that. Arrow up. That's another one. I kind of mentioned that before. When there's an arrow that's active, one or more, as long as you see it, just call it out. You'll be amazed at how often that can make the difference between someone getting shot or not. Alert teammates to flank attempts. Yeah, I kind of already said that. Name, look, direction. That's another way to alert teammates to those flank attempts. Yeah, this is all good stuff to be getting into the habit of. Leadership. This is one I'm not going to expand on like a whole bunch. That's something I probably need to do a little more research on myself. I don't find myself often going into a leadership position. I mean, sometimes I do, but if you are someone who finds yourself naturally falling into a leadership position, try shot calling. That's if you're comfortable. You'll be surprised at who will follow you. If you're in a team with people who are not naturally inclined to engage in that kind of behavior, you might find that you're able to, and that can also get people to rally behind you, rally with you, move, look for opportunities and so on. If you don't have a specific idea in mind, but you want people to kind of move around you, you say on me, kind of a rallying cry, like group up with me. And then once people react to that and they start to move with you, you can then transition into more specific commands that are beneficial. Conversely, if you see that someone else is naturally falling into a leadership position and shot calling, try feeding them information. Try just telling them things, and maybe they'll turn that into some kind of leadership moment. Maybe they'll start shot calling. So look for those opportunities as well. I want to talk about drills in practice, some things you can do to kind of practice, tactical combat, how to engage in small group fights and so on. One is to, and this is very easy, this is kind of a low bar sort of thing, is to practice 1-on-2 fights with groups of 3. Rotate the 1 as whoever gets the killing blow in the group of 2, or you could just round robin. and just kind of sequence through the group of three, just taking turns being the one on the two. Try this out with different fighting styles. Try like a couple sword boards, try like sword board Florentine, maybe you can get spicy and throw a polearm in there. It's really good practice for multi-opponent combat, which is something you want to be able to do. In many combat situations, you will be either outnumbered or you will outnumber the opponent. So this practice can be applied and extrapolated to 3 versus 2, 4 versus 2, 5v3, 5v2, and so on. Another thing you can do to practice, I kind of alluded to this earlier, is delay your presence on the line for some fights. Observe the initial engagement and decide where to go based on that. You can also sit fights out every so often and observe them and just kind of reflect on what happened. Look at the habits of certain individual fighters. See how maybe you can capitalize on those habits. Either if it's an opponent, maybe they overextend a lot. Maybe there's someone on your team who's like, looking for flanks all the time. Maybe you can run around with them. Another thing you can do, and this one's a little bit harder to kind of facilitate. It really depends. If you are someone who has a fighting company or a unit and you have like a larger group of people who are willing to engage in this, you can do what's called a freeze battle. This one requires, like I said, everyone will be on board, but the concept is pretty simple. Someone is designated to say freeze in the middle of a fight. Like maybe you get into a line fight, big group fight, everyone stops what they're doing wherever they are, no matter what, and they observe the current state of the fight. And you just kind of talk through it. Maybe you workshop it a bit, This is easier to set up, again, with a fighting company or unit than it is with any regular ditch line. So your mileage may vary if you try to do this at your park. Lastly, I want to talk about the concept of the after-action review. This is basically a thought exercise. What did your team, you're basically asking 4 questions to yourself or to a group, right? What did you or your team want to happen? What actually happened? What did you or your team do that went well? And what could you or your team do that could be improved? This process could be as elaborate as a workshop that you discuss with others, maybe again, your fighting company, or it could be as simple as an internal and introspective process that you engage in between rounds on the battlefield. I highly recommend doing the solo version every so often just to see how it feels, just to get in the habit of battlefield analysis in general, And that's basically it. That's all I had for today. I guess last round of questions, comments, suggestions. Ooh.
Nothing in particular from my end.
Okay. Cool.
I'm honestly just sitting here like processing and internalizing information.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, I don't know about you, Rune, but I'm not a very good auditory processor, so I often find that like so I'm rarely on the teaching side. This is like the first class I've really tried to teach, so like I've attended a lot of classes.
Really?
Yeah, this is the first time I've ever taught a class like in this at all. Yeah.
You did an amazing job.
Whoa. Thank you. I appreciate that. Anyway, I am normally the one who is attending a class, and I don't always absorb everything, and it takes me a while to process and internalize, so I know kind of how you feel about that. So, understood. Thank you, Lightning. Yeah, no, I was really nervous. I wasn't going to have a good visual aid. I thought I would have to just like talk and just kind of like describe things all day, but thankfully the visual aid was there. I thought about using like a chessboard and using like a separate camera, but that I think just ended up being like the best compromise because I could just screen share on the same computer and everything. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. So like there was an event online, Battle for the Ring. Some of you might be aware of it. It's this Belgrade event that usually is held out in California, SoCal. And this year we had it, online, obviously, COVID and all. And Rift, the person who made this game, he ran a tournament where basically there were like 6 teams and they would just kind of, I don't know the game terribly well. I wasn't really around for it because I was event staff as well, and I didn't have the time. But it just ended up being like a really handy visual aid. But yeah, no. Yeah, there's here. Let's see. So it's in the workshop. You know what? I'll find the link and I'll share it here. Steam Games Workshop Medieval Melee. I think it's Steam Games. Oh. Let me see if I can find it. I will look around and I'll find it and I'll post it in the classroom here in a moment.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. Actually. Okay, found it. And here it is. Yeah, you just have to. I think most of you are probably. I mean, for anyone who's not familiar, basically you have to subscribe to the workshop, and then you can access it through Tabletop Simulator, which you have to have. That's the base game that allows you access to this game. If you're curious, yeah, I guess I would say like reach out. I don't know the rules of like the game. I merely used it as a visual aid, but if you're curious, his name's Rift. He goes by Eric Becking on Facebook. So yeah, if you're curious about it, reach out to him and he can give you some information. He, I think, would be thrilled to have more people interested in it. So yeah.
Now you can tell him that your use of it as a demo also doubled as a sales pitch.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the things I kind of ran it by him. I was like, hey, like, is it cool if I use this as a visual aid? And he's like, yeah, sure. Just like plug my name. And I'm like, okay, yeah, no problem. I'll give credit where it's due. I'm not going to claim I made it, obviously. So yeah.
Leal wants spell check on names in the chat.
You got it, Eric Becking. Yep. As it sounds. Like his full name on Facebook is Eric Rift Becking. He's doing the thing. A lot of Bellingham do this. I guess Amtgard do this too, where they put their fighting name kind of as their middle name. So there's that too. Cool. All right. Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you for attending. I really appreciate the opportunity to kind of do teaching. I'm hoping to do more of this in the future. Hopefully, maybe in person. So.
Thank you so much. Jarvis, this whole thing has been recorded, so sometime after the event, because goodness knows there's too much going on during the event to do this, I'm going to be reaching out to all the class teachers and being like, hey, I have a recording of your class. What do you want me to do with it? So if you want it in like Google Drive so you can futz with it, if you want me to cut it into a full-on YouTube thing, if you want me to just do a rough cut.
That's awesome. Thank you for recording that. I really appreciate it. I'll let you know what I want to. Yeah.
Super glad our tech guy got us to a point where we could record.
All right. Nice. Okay. Cool. And then that's right. I'm supposed to record like attendance and stuff. I remember it was you three and
Ferris. You don't have to record attendance. We have that covered.
Oh, okay. Cool.
We ended up getting a bot that tracks when people connect and disconnect from voice calls, so we can look who was here for more than like 2 minutes because they stopped in, decided they didn't want to stick around and left, etc.
Okay. All right then.
I just wanted to save you from doing the mental work before you did it.
Okay.